Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Back to Care panel with our patients here. Today we'll have a discussion about what it means to come back to care for those in the low protein community. I'm going to walk through some of our resources that we do have available, but then we will dive into the panel. The first thing that I wanted to share with everyone is we do have a Back to Care page on our site. It is HCU Network America /back-to-care. On our website, you will find there are different resources for understanding HCU, managing your diet, and support, including our Back to Care mentor program. We do have a couple of Back to Care success stories on our site as well. These are easily to be managed and utilized. One resource I do want to also highlight, in addition to the resources here, is our Back to Care guide that we have developed with patients in mind. And so it walks you through what it means to reestablish care, what homocystinuria is, reestablishing yourself with a diet, and developing a support system. So we hope that you guys will find the information today shared in this webinar useful. So we will go ahead and start our panel discussion here. I will introduce myself, and then our panelists will go ahead and introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into our conversation. My name is Danae Barkey. I am the Executive Director of HCU Network America, as well as an adult classical homocystinuria patient. I was diagnosed at the age of 10 after my brother's lenses became dislocated. I was asymptomatic at the time of diagnosis. After we received the diagnosis, we were trialed with B6 and the kind of normal routine, and then were placed eventually on the low protein diet, which we really struggled to adhere to. It was just very foreign to us, as with many late diagnosed patients. I have been successfully back on diet, successfully on diet, I should say, for 12 years. And I'm looking forward to sharing my Back to Care journey along with the others here today. Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Amy Marchese. I was tested as a baby for homocystinuria and other disorders like it, but I wasn't misdiagnosed. I was borderline, and they never told my mother. So at around 8, they had misdiagnosed me with morphans, and then realized I had homocystinuria when my lenses were dislocated. And it's only been in the last year and a half that I've actually been able to get on diet and get my levels down. So I'm excited to be here with you and tell you about my journey.
All right. Janet, do you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Janet. I was diagnosed between, I think, not great at remembering, but between 9 to 10. The way I found out was through my primary doctor. He figured out I had scoliosis, and so he sent me to Children's Hospital, and they decided to run extra tests, and that's how I was diagnosed with homocystinuria. I am returning. I'm a returning patient after suffering a blood clot. I still struggle with my diet. I've always struggled, and that's where I'm at.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Valerie, do you want to go next?
Sorry. Hi, I'm Valerie, and I was diagnosed at birth with the newborn screening test, and I am currently coming back on diet. It's been about a year and a half for me as well, being consistent with it, but I still do have my struggles constantly.
All right. Thank you so much. So we'll dive in here so that all kind of gave a background a little bit on, you know, how we were diagnosed. And then, you know, some of us were diagnosed earlier than others. But, you know, I know when we got our diagnosis, it was just as much of a learning experience for us as it was for my mother. And she really tried to help us understand and adhere to the diet, but it, you know, she didn't understand it really either at that time. Do you guys, let's see, who should I start with? Valerie, I'll start with you. Sorry. Did you feel that your parents, their having that early diagnosis helped kind of walk you through understanding homocystinuria? And do you think you got that help that you needed? Or do you think what was your experience like with the diet as a child?
Well, so at the time, there was very little research on homocystinuria in general. So I feel when my parents got that diagnosis, it was still very new. Nobody ever heard of it. They went to the public library where they found maybe a paragraph or two about the condition. And they really had to dig every day to try to find, what is this? What are we going to do with our child? How are we going to feed her? In terms of diet, I feel, given that there was so little information and working with the dietitians, they did an amazing job being extremely creative, doing the measurements to the T. I mean, they basically became little mathematicians / nutritionists themselves because they didn't have a choice. They had to, and they did a wonderful job doing that. And growing up, as far as diet, you know, they bought the food, they made the food. So I didn't, you know, when you're a child, you get what you eat, and they did a really nice job with that. And they never made me feel any different from my other siblings or peers in school. Of course, there was times of social differences, especially, you know, I remember like in kindergarten being like, I have my own personal little snack and everybody else gets these other snacks. So, you know, there was always challenges, but I thought overall they did a very good job with the little information that they had, and everybody was kind of learning as we went. And same with me, I was learning, you know, what I can eat, what I can't eat, and how to express that to my teachers and my peers, or if I went to a sleepover.
Amy, do you remember what it was like when you received your diagnosis? Like the support that you got from your family, do you feel like it was enough, or do you think like it was really kind of like everyone learning to kind of swim at the same time, and per se?
So I was raised by my mother and my grandmother for many years. And I really feel that they did the best that they could do with the information that was out there, and they were very supportive. I will never forget those first shakes. They were horrible. My mom would sit with me for 3 or 4 hours saying chug-a-lug just to get me to get the shakes down. And then like 2 hours after we finished one, we'd restart to do the next one. But it was really hard. I felt like I kind of had the sheets pulled out from underneath me. My family had a restaurant, so I grew up eating all the wonderful meats that we can't eat. So going from that to eating this plastic food and being told that I could have 5 grams of protein a day, which was like a potato, was really hard. And my mom was very creative with what she would try to put together. But she, even before like I was diagnosed, she just knew something was wrong with me. That there was, because I always had all these learning issues growing up. I was growing super fast, and I was having a lot of issues with my eyes. Prior to having surgery years ago, I had glasses that were like a 1/2 inch thick. So it's just a lot of stuff that went into it, but I'm so grateful to have had the support that I had and continue to have. It's just taken me a while to kind of get where I need to be for me.
Yeah. I know for myself, I always tell people it was never a matter of like me choosing to be non-compliant, I just don't think we ever got the proper diet education that is required to be adherent to the low protein diet. And just because there's so much to learn. And so I know for myself, I always tell people that it was never that it was a choice to go off diet. And it's never that I purposely went off diet. It's just that I just never knew what to actually eat, because we were given very loose parameters, like eat 20 grams of protein and take this formula, but never really given the tools necessarily to succeed, like never how to read a nutrition label or where to access foods even that were low in protein. And so it's just like, we just did what we could with, you know, that little bit of information that we had. With that diagnosis, you know, I know obviously later, Amy, do you feel like it was always just a struggle from the get-go, or do you feel like that initial time period where it was with the care of your mother and grandmother, do you feel like that was easier and then it got harder as you transitioned into an independent adult?
It's hard to say. There's different levels of difficulty because you're much more shielded as a child. You don't have the same kind of options. Whereas when you start to grow up, you go to high school, you go to college, you have access to those other foods that you can't eat. And like you were saying, it's very confusing about like the amount of protein you could intake. Shortly after I was diagnosed, like Valerie said, there really wasn't that much information. And they didn't actually know how to properly test the levels at that point. So they thought I was doing great with the way that they used to test. And then they found a new way to test. I'm like, oh, her levels are kind of like off the charts. That's really bad. We need to like less protein, more supplemental shakes and everything else. It was hard as a kid to kind of feel like I was at odds with my mother at times because she was just doing the best that she could do to keep me healthy and safe. But I didn't want to eat this plastic tasting food or just be eating all the stuff that was totally foreign to me. And in college, I understood that I couldn't eat certain things, but having that freedom, I think like for any kid, no matter if they have this or not, they're gonna chase that freedom and like explore what they like and they don't like, regardless of whatever knowledge they may have.
Yeah. Valerie, when would you say that your compliance issues started?
I would say 21 is when I was really off my diet, and I struggled with it the most about that age.
Mm-hmm. Were there certain situations that made you more likely to, like, what about 21? Do you think the circumstance made it like?
I think a really big challenge for me was the formula, the medication. I really did not like the taste. It was very hard for me to get down. I just was not compliant with it. And it was because of the taste and the smell and the way that it made me feel so full that I didn't want to do anything active, but just sit there. And I guess the best way I could describe that feeling is if you overeat and then you're like, oh my goodness, my belly is so full. I just don't want to do anything for just a minute. So I hated those feelings. At 21, I was in college and I partied a lot. I went out to the bars, I drank, and I know that seems really silly, but when you're out and you're drinking with your friends, you're not thinking, you know what's going to satisfy my needs right now? Some carrot sticks, because that's what I can eat. I'm thinking, yeah, somebody says, hey, let's order pizza. Yeah, let's order that pizza. I'm going to eat it. And I'm not supposed to eat it, but I did. And I wasn't thinking, let me have a shake right now either, because that would be filling and that would be healthier choice. But that's not what you do when you're 21, especially when you're out partying. And I lived that way for a very long time. And it was an emotional mental challenge for me to stay compliant in medication.
Yeah.
Not to mention, I also went through a lot of insurance changes. An insurance company wasn't paying for my medication, and I never told my parents that, because they would have done anything to, get my medication paid for. But because there was a lack of that, it was like, whatever. I'm not, I'm not going to mention this to my parents. I don't care about being on diet right now, and insurance isn't paying for it anyways. That also played a little contribution into diet.
Yeah, I think you make some good points there, because I know for me, where like I would say I went off the rails personally was about that same time. And it wasn't so much partying, it was the affordability factor that you mentioned. And diet is very expensive to be compliant. And when, you go off to college, your goal is to be independent. And like most college students are looking for that clean breakaway to really show that they can do this. They can become adults. So the last thing we want to do is go back to their family and be like, I can't afford my medication. I can't afford my food. I can't afford my formula. And, I know that was a huge part for me, because the truth is it was like, do I pay rent or do I pay for low protein food? Well, I'm going to pay for my rent because I need a roof over my head. And then it became like, okay, well, I'm working a full-time job. My formula doesn't fit into this lifestyle of working full-time and going to school full-time. So there was no convenience with that either. And I mean, and then to, if I would have had the time, would have had the financial resources, finding the time to even cook the food. It was just, it's really hard to kind of learn to balance all those things for the first time when you're really off and on your own. Janet, sorry, we haven't heard from you. I know that your circumstances are a little bit different. What are some of the factors that played into, your understanding and knowledge, and then also compliance, before your back to care journey started?
Well, to me, it was a bit different. I think, I hate this. I hate crying.
It's okay. We're all.
Oh God. Yeah. Oh, I hate it. To me, I think I was confused a lot. Because I think even, when I started returning back into care, there's a lot of things I didn't understand. And, excuse me.
Doing great.
Oh God, I hate this so much. For me, it was like my parents were super, they were always helpful. They were always wanting to help, and they still are till this day. But I think that to me, it was it was a language barrier. My parents are from Mexico, so like, they kind of understood, but they didn't understand. And then on top of that, like, I didn't know a lot what was going on. I just knew that I was told that I couldn't eat these things. And the last thing, obviously, I wanted to do was to stand out, especially as a kid. And I feel like I carry that trauma a lot because of the diet, because I was like pretty much ostracized as a kid. And then on top of that, not understanding when the kids are just like, they're being your kids, kids don't know any better, and why are you eating this? This looks gross. And then me not understanding to defend myself. So that's kind of where my situation was at. I'm still learning, there's still things I don't know. And I just feel like everything I had to grow and to know is through me. but my parents have always, if something's wrong or something I need, my parents have always, tried to help in the best way they can, you know, um, with medications. Always my dad has always been there to help um give me my medication, because if it wasn't for him, like sometimes I wouldn't even take it because it's just like it tastes gross, it tastes nasty. And I remember as a kid, he would just spend hours with me, trying to get the old formula that they used to have. It used to be in a can. I don't know if you guys remember that. And and him trying to kind of understand from the dietitian's standpoint and be like, come on, Janet, you can do it. We can do it. We can try. And it was a lot, because it's like I kind of had to feel like I had to understand what was going on, but it's like at the same time I was lost. I lost for a long time. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's I've always struggled with the diet. I still do. I think I'll struggle for it for a long time. So I went off diet. I mean, I've always went off diet, but I think ever since I stopped seeking care, I think about it, and I was 18 or 19 or 20, around that age, after I think I had my blood clot. The doctors were kind of like, I told you so kind of thing, because they warned me that I was prone to blood clots, but I just never thought that I could have that was gonna that was gonna happen to me. And I felt like at that point I was kind of mad at myself, because like I kind of self-sabotaged myself. And I mean, I just turned 30 this year, and I figured that I already went through a blood clot. I can't do another blood clot. My body can't do it anymore. And I mean, I've been constantly in and out of surgeries, so it's just like, it's harder as I'm getting older. Just trying to understand this where I'm at, So I'm sorry, I'm such a baby.
No.
Oh,
Well, it's
so
emotional because it's a huge burden that we have to carry. And, I think your situation presents itself almost heavier because of that language barrier, because really you're also having to play that role. And, you're a child and you're trying to wrap your head around this. And then you're trying to also help
right.
your parents, understand it in a language that's accessible to them. And so it puts a lot of responsibility on you from a young age, and especially for something that you don't even understand. So, for them to understand, you are really put into a circumstance that, put a lot of pressure on you. I mean, it's really awful to, to think that kids have to really be that go-between for them and their parents, and for the situation that they don't even fully understand, but has, a huge impact on them. And there's things that, sometimes that kids just didn't hear.
Yeah.
I mean, we do always, I feel like at some point there are things we're going to hear anyways as patients, just because they've lost their patience with us. And then we hear those things, but those aren't the things that you want to hear from the beginning. So you mentioned your blood clot, and I know you had mentioned scoliosis. Amy and Valerie, were there things that you had experienced symptom-wise prior to coming back to care or trying to give the diet a real chance?
I'm gonna go first, Amy.
You go first. I don't know that I ever really noticed anything specifically like with my body, except the fact that I was always growing. And I'm going to use the same word that Janet used, ostracized. I felt ostracized from my peers. because I was taller than even most of my teachers, let alone my other peers. And I didn't want to be tall. It was always hard to find clothes, and it's gotten even harder as an adult. And then also going from like, you know, having my ham sandwiches or whatever to carrot sticks or something. I don't remember what I had for lunch, but it was very clearly different from the other kids, and they noticed that. Even in school, this is something I meant to mention before. I remember the roommates complaining about my rice cooker because I would use rice as a filler for some of my meals. They like, my sheets smell like rice. So it was never anything that like I personally like felt in my body, but it was psychological, which made me kind of veer more from the path. And there was a lot of fear involved in the decisions I made about what I consumed, because I didn't even want to go to my doctors, because every time I would go and my levels would be high, it's like I was getting dressed down. You need to do this or you're going to get sick. And what hit me emotionally more than that was actually seeing, I will always remember this kid. There was some kid in the waiting room where I used to go see my doctor at Mount Sinai. And I guess the kid wasn't feeling good. And one of the doctors came out and said, I hear you're not feeling well. We're going to admit you to the hospital. And that scared the shit out of me because this kid was younger than I was. And I always knew that something could happen. But somewhere along the line, I just decided, all right, well, if I'm going to die young, I might as well enjoy the food I'm going to eat. But as I started to grow up, the change for me, my values changed. I got married in the midst of the beginning of the pandemic, and I can't have kids if my levels are going to be sky high. So I need to start taking care of me so that I can have the future that I didn't think I could have before.
Valerie, do you want to talk about through some of your symptoms and kind of what led you back to diet as well?
I'm going to piggyback off of Amy, what she had mentioned. You know, she was in the waiting room and she saw that the young person who was sick. My metabolic team had also, growing up, used other scenarios and other people whom I didn't meet. Only one person who had the same condition as me, we had passed in the hallway, but they had used him as an example and a scare tactic to me of, if you don't be compliant, you're going to have those fixed glasses, you're going to have these skeletal problems, and you're going to basically die if you don't start doing these things. And I was really taken back because I was a younger person and that was very impressionable, to where I had the same mindset as Amy, where it was like, well, if this is my fate and I'm going to be off diet and there's no hope for me, the only hope is like, I'm going to get a blood clot or I'm going to die, then let's get to the punchline, because this isn't fun to just sit there and be like, all right, is today the day I'm getting a clot? Is today the day that I have to do this? So I have this enormous guilt on top of going off diet, because you do feel guilty going off diet. You know you're doing a bad thing. I made that choice. I know right and from wrong, but I still made the choice to go off diet. And then I knew the consequences, but I didn't care because I was so depressed and I thought, there's no way out of this hole. I can't get out of it. And this is going to be my future. And I worked in healthcare. So when you work with elderly people, you see these things and you can visualize yourself being in that same position, having that stroke and not being able to use those body parts. And it was like, let's just speed it up. I don't care anymore. I don't want to live. And that was my mindset. And it's a very dark place to be in. So that did not help me when I was off diet. And that honestly kept me. So I think as a medical professional, don't use other people as scare tactics towards younger generations. It's not a good practice to do to people. There's other ways to get that point across to stay on diet. But the things that I did start to feel when I was off diet was very sluggish. I was extremely tired. My hair stopped growing. I always had very long hair down to my waist. And it has not grown back. And that is one side effect my doctors did say would happen, and it did happen. My lenses started to shift, although we didn't know it at the time. It took a really long time for them to actually figure out that that was the problem, but my vision was going. I felt very groggy. I couldn't concentrate, and there would be moments where I would be like, I really don't feel good. I just wanted to stop, and I'd have to lay down in bed and not do anything and just, pray I'm going to feel better after this. And the next day I would feel a little better, but I would still be sick. So when I actually did get back on diet, it was very easy for me to distinguish, wow, I was very tired. I don't know how I made it through those days, getting, working and going to school and just being a functional person from day to day, because it wasn't until I was back on diet where I realized I have more energy, I don't feel groggy, I have better concentration, and other things were coming into play. My skin looked better. I didn't look gray like I was sick. So that was my experience.
If I could just sort of piggyback off of some of what you were saying, I think it's different for me. I never really, because the only thing I knew was like fighting to be off of my diet. Even when my mom was like keeping me on it, I never really noticed the shift. It was just kind of like how I felt. I'm always tired, regardless of whether or not I'm taking my shakes. The only difference I feel, there's two differences I feel. One is that my muscles don't ache. When I'm not on my shakes and stuff, I get tired just getting dressed. I feel like I just did a workout. But the other thing is, because I decided that I wanted to get healthy for the future and my own family, I go get my test done every week. I don't wait once a year or do it every 6 months to avoid the doctors. I think part of it is that I found a nutritionist that I really like. And instead of things being punitive, it's supportive and understanding. That goes finding the right doctors goes a long way in changing your perception of how you approach things. But knowing that where I was, my levels were over 300 when I started this, but the fact that they're now down in the 70, 80 range is huge.
Good job, Amy.
Thank you.
That's huge.
But I also think a lot about previous conversations with Danae and how she notices a difference in the clarity of her thinking when her levels start to go up. And I don't know if my levels will ever get down as low as hers are. I hope they do. But I'm also cognizant of like the clarity of my thinking. I still don't think I think as clearly as I could. And I am concerned about the damage I may have done. But the fact that I'm putting the effort in now, I'm open to accepting the support, which I was not as a kid. I didn't want to be like these other Homocystinuria kids because we were all ostracized and eating this weird food. And what the heck is going on?
I think also as kids, by accepting support, that's us admitting that something is wrong and that we are different. And I think that's a really hard thing to balance, is like understanding the support is necessary so that you can have, the best life possible, because you're also fighting that whole adolescent mindset, like I will not be different. I am going to be normal. And the truth is that there is no such thing as normal. Like normal is this term that it's made up, because everyone has these problems that they're all trying to overcome in some shape, way, or form. It's just they all look a little bit different. So but you don't get that when you're a teenager.
And like as a kid, I mean, even as an adult,
Yeah.
but as a kid, especially when it's a new diagnosis and you're really in the raw thick of processing it, it's not like just once a day where you take your pills like some other people might and you're good to go. You are reminded of it depending on what your prescriptive diet is with shakes and stuff 2, 3, 4 times a day that you have this. You cannot escape it. And very much like Valerie was talking about the guilt, I did feel guilty. And I do feel guilty on the days when, okay, I haven't gotten all the shakes in, but you know what? I've tried. And because I've shown that I can shown myself, put aside the support, because I've shown myself that I can get to where I need to be. When it does go up and I make mistakes, I accept it with grace and just be like, tomorrow's a new day. I can get back on track.
I think that's.
Did you guys? Oh, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
It's all right, Janet. Go ahead.
I was going to say, did you guys all? Did you guys growing up knew more people like you guys, or did you at least know that there was somebody like you guys growing up?
So I have a really funny story to share. So when the internet was new, there was one homocystinuria website, HCUsupport.com. And until that website, I thought my brother and I were the only ones with homocystinuria. So later I found out this is Barat, and this is his website. So it was really exciting. It was like being starstruck. So it took from that point so then I finally met his mother about a decade later at a PKU conference. I figure if you can't find homocystinuria patients, you can always find a PKU patient, who at least has a similar diet and takes similar formula. But I met his mother there. So the first time I met another patient, there was actually a group of patients. So it was 2011, I think, is when I finally met other patients. And it was like finally a homecoming, but this also weird starstruck moment because Barat was there and he had been he was internet famous. Like he had his own webpage. So it was really that was it. Like prior to the internet really taking off in Facebook and MySpace, I'll really show my age here. There was no opportunities to connect with other patients. So it's really exciting, when Facebook finally had Facebook groups and you could connect with patients. It's having that kind of social support is really important. I know that was one of the questions I had is about, what influence the social aspect has on compliance. Because I know for me, it was a huge one coming from a big family. Garrett and I are from a family with 8 children. And so there's at least my sibling, but even they had a hard time really understanding the diet. And I remember one of our brothers, he would just tease us relentlessly about our formula. And he just could not understand why we made such a big deal about taking it and eating the food. And then one day we're like, you just have to eat 1 slice of low protein bread, 1 slice. And because he had never tried it. And he sat down to the table with his 1 slice of low protein bread. And you would have thought like we were like giving him like the world's worst food because he was sitting there and gagging and like dry heaving, like to get down what we are expected to eat on a daily basis. He said, see, this is what we have to go through every single day. Now, please do not give us a hard time about this. And, really, I think it was a good experience for him. Yes, he's a younger brother, but he really finally realized like, okay, this is serious. They have to do this and it's not pleasant. I need to stop teasing them. Now we can take a little bit more of the teasing now that we're adults, but, having that kind of, it's a social thing. Food is very social and you want to at least be able to sit down and have a meal with your family. But when they're not even understanding, it definitely makes it hard. So it's in a long drawn about way.
Because I went 28 years not knowing anybody that had HCU.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a hard one on me.
Yeah.
So.
Barat's mom was the first one that I had met too.
Okay. Valerie, had you actually met anyone prior to your diet? Like prior to Facebook world or social media or meetups?
Well, I don't have Facebook. And prior to this, even growing up, no, I did not meet anybody with HCU. I did see the little boy in passing, like I had mentioned earlier, but we were never properly introduced. I did, through metabolic clinic, meet patients with PKU, and it was to relate to them in terms of our diet. You know, we all had our struggles, and I could relate to them on that, but never anybody with HCU. And it really wasn't until I found the HCU Network of America that I was introduced to you, Danae. and that was so awesome. I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be able to talk to somebody who's very, similar in my age, and I just get to pick her. And that was so helpful. The HCU Network of America has been extremely helpful for me in terms of social, because I am older, and it is very nice to have people who you can relate to and share those experiences and be like, I'm really struggling, and they get it. My doctors, the metabolic team, they understand it to an extent, but you don't really grasp it unless you're living the life.
Yeah, no, definitely. Ashley was able to join. Originally he wasn't sure if you'd be able to. So Ashley, do you just mind really quickly introducing yourself, your name, when you were diagnosed, and, a little bit, like a very quick snippet of your back to care, when did your back to care journey?
I was diagnosed as a teenager, as a young teenager. After they initially found my scoliosis, they ran a whole load of other tests to try and see if there were anything else wrong with me, and they found HCU. So that was that. Then I was initially quite resistant to going on the diet. I was probably a bit too young at the time to understand the seriousness of the condition and what I had. So I put it off for years and years. Thank goodness it took me to see levels of over 1,000 in methionine and over 250 in HCU to actually realise that I needed to make a change to my life. I made a change. I can tell you my HCU level is now under 50, which I'm very happy about, thanks to diet. Yeah, I'm making good progress, I would say.
Excellent. How would, I'm trying to think about here, because our time is starting just to quickly come to an end. It always goes like so fast. Are there things that when you were first diagnosed as teens, because it sounds like a lot of us were, preteen, teen. I know, Valerie, you were a child, but, things that you wish you would have known as a child, like if you could go back in time and talk to yourself and give yourself, like, just, share some information or give yourself some advice, what kind of things would you say to yourself or to your parents even, about it? Or things that you wish you would have known, I guess, too, because I know for myself, like, I wish I would have understood the role that formula played. Like, I didn't understand, like, formula's job was to keep me full, and I wouldn't have been so skinny. I had a lot of horrible nicknames in middle school related to how thin I was. And if I would have understood, like, formula would have, helped me maintain a healthy weight, I would have probably been way more compliant and understanding. And also maybe it would have helped with some of the other issues that I had in terms of my skin and my eyes, all the things that, made you a prime target when you're in middle school, unfortunately. I think I would have really appreciated someone sitting down and kind of talking to me about that importance, even more so than the diet stuff. I think it would have meant maybe a little bit more.
think for myself, I would have appreciated my metabolic team at the time to be more positive about it instead of using a scare tactic. Just to say, hey, you know, we know you're not being compliant right now, but you can bring your levels down, and we're going to make this a more positive experience instead of trying to scare you to thinking the absolute worst. And I think that support would have been really helpful. So it wasn't scary going, you know, I got to go to my doctor, I'm going to get yelled at, I'm going to get all these negative things, and I already have negative things in my head of guilt. And had it been like positive, it would have been like, this is a safe place to come. They're here to try to help me get back on diet, even though they were trying to help me just in a more aggressive approach of scaring somebody, which I didn't think was very nice. So I think for me, that would have been better. And any advice I would give myself in the future would be like, you know, hey, one day you're going to want a family. And if you keep eating bad, that really might not be a possibility for you.
Mhm.
So just try to stick to it.
Yeah. Janet or Ashley, is there things that you would, you wish you would have known, or things that you would have, if you could go back and tell yourself something regarding homocystinuria?
I feel like to me,
Doctors too. It could be pointed to them.
to me, it would probably be that that there are people like me, and that you will get a blood clot, you know. I wish I would have listened to my doctors a little bit more. Oh God, I think it's so emotional. I think it's just that, you know,
Mhm.
just having to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the big thing is that all teenagers need, as much as they push parents, adults, others away, is they need support. They need the support of others, even if they act like they don't want it, but knowing that there's other people like them going through these things that do have to follow this diet and have to like take this formula, because it is so incredibly isolating when you're the only one eating this specific way or drinking this stuff, because I mean, food is a communal experience, and if you're the only one not being able to eat this way, it's lonely. It's incredibly lonely. And that's just the food aspect. It's not even what you're dealing with physically in terms of like what's happening to your body and your mental health. There's so much.
I think it's important for new parents or even current parents that have a teenager or somebody younger, constantly reminding your kid that they have to eat a certain way or that they have this isn't helping them. Let them know that you know that it's tough, because we don't need any more reminders that we're different, especially from the people closest to us.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Ashley, is there things that you could go back, if you could go back and tell yourself, or you wish you would have known as when you were first diagnosed, or even a little later?
I think for myself, it's just I'm very lucky compared to a lot of other people on this stream, and I think just I wish I'd have put myself on it sooner. So soon, that's the only thing I could say really. I am very fortunate, because if I'm honest with myself, I'm lucky something didn't happen to me. I'm very thankful something didn't, but if it didn't, because I thought that was the only wake-up call at one point. I thought, that's the only way I'm going to change, if I have that sort of wake-up call. And thankfully, I didn't let it go to that, but the way I was going at one point, how well on the road to. So yeah, I think I'm just glad I made the change before it got to that stage.
For as we close out here, are there things, things that you have found that have helped you become successful or have helped you, I feel like the road back to care is, I'd say I've been successfully back to care for 12 years, but it does not mean that it's easy. I still have struggles on a daily basis. Pill compliance is probably one of my bigger issues, just because it's a lot of pills and you have to sort them out and remember to take them. And so just because you do well does not mean it's a struggle. So I don't want to minimize anyone who is struggling by any means, because it is hard. But are there resources or things that tips, resources, tools, apps, routines, even that you guys have found helpful in helping you be more successful, or that have helped you stick to things better?
So when I finally decided that I needed to make a change, I started doing something that I hate doing, keeping a food diary. And I used this app called BiteSnap. So if I was on the go, I was busy, I could literally just take a picture of what I had eaten, and I could go back in and then say roughly how much of each thing. And it would tell me the calories, because calories are always a fighting problem, especially when you couldn't eat that much. So they always give you something fried. And now everything is just high in calories. But they really helped me understand how much protein I was intaking. I thought I was sitting around what I'm allowed, 30, actually I was a little over. I thought it was about 40, 45. And then it was like 100 grams of protein. And I'm like, wait a second, where did this protein come from? So I don't do it as consistently anymore. But when I start to feel like something's off or I see my levels going back up, I do it, and I find certain foods that I can rotate in and out that fall within those parameters. I would also suggest that even if you've had bad experiences with formula, while the types of medication and formula out there have not changed that much, they are trying to change the flavor profile. Don't be afraid to get inventive. Your doctors can usually get you some samples if you're concerned about like the cost of trying new things, but mix it with some different things. Even if it's not something you do long term, if it's a reprieve from your typical shake, that goes a long way. And sometimes, and I'll say this for other people like me that have a higher tolerance, even if doctors saying, oh, you don't necessarily need the low protein food, get the low protein food. It's expensive, but what it affords you is meals where you don't have to eat that much protein, so that you can have a time during the day where you can eat a slightly more normal diet, a conservatively more normal diet. So in the morning and for the morning and lunch, I only used like a third to a half of my protein, so I can have a nice dinner that feels more normal. So.
Bailey, are there things that have helped you be more successful, or resources?
I think for myself personally, it can be really overwhelming trying to get back on diet. And so just tackling one thing that I want to work on at a time has really helped me progress. So, my goal 2 years ago was I'm going to be consistent at taking my medication. And I didn't worry about what I was eating necessarily, but I just focused on taking my medicine. That was step one. And as soon as I got that down, then I started to add something else to that when I felt confident with that. And that was, let's work on what we're eating today. And so I didn't go off and buy low protein food right off the bat because I don't like it. It's gross. It can be filling, yes, and that's nice, but it wasn't for me at the time, and I knew I wouldn't be compliant. So it was, let's look at the more gluten-free options and start there from eating. And then I slowly just started adding one little thing at a time, and it has helped me. it's still a struggle, but it's a work in progress.
I think that's an important thing to remember is that, things that we do successfully are things that take time. And so it is a building process, because I remember that after I had my blood clot, it wasn't just like, okay, I'm going to make this magical change overnight, because, well, a blood clot takes years to develop, and so does a real routine. So like I had always been taking my formula, but I hadn't been taking all of it. So that's where I started as well, just because it helped me feel full. And then it was like, all right, going to cut out all those little bites of meat that you don't think add up, but really do. Because it was like, just not knowing, like a bite of a pork chop could have like 3 grams of protein. It was like, whoa, that's not worth it. Like that bite is not anywhere near I want to be. And then it went to dairy, which was like cheese specifically, which was really hard to give up. But it was, all those things, but that slow, like those slow changes definitely make it a lot more realistic to continue. And I know for myself, just having a routine for formula, like take my formula with my breakfast, I take my formula with my lunch, I take my formula with my dinner. It's not the most exciting way to do it, but I love food and I'm never going to miss a meal. So I'm never going to miss my formula if I always take it with a meal. And I usually try to take it first, so that way I'm kind of somewhat full. So that way I'm less likely to want to go up and eat seconds or thirds. And so, I think that's a good point, is that, it sometimes works the best when it's a slow progression back to where you need to be.
Following your kind of meal plan shakes with meals, that's
Mhm.
kind of that's what got me to where I am for the most part.
Yeah.
So, and I one other thing I just wanted to mention is it's hard to get on track, and it's never not going to be hard. But once you prove to yourself that you can do it, it's not as challenging or overbearing as it might seem from afar. It is possible.
I think anytime you're building a new routine, like if it's working out or, if it's reading 20 minutes a day, anytime you're trying to do something new, it's going to be hard because it's new. And so new things are challenging because they're just things that you haven't done before. And so it's part of the growth process. Growth is hard. It doesn't matter if it's a physical thing or, a thing that we do within ourselves. And so it's definitely difficult. Ashley, I wanted to loop back with you. Are there things that you have felt that have made you more successful? Again, it can be an app or routine or tips or whatever it is.
I think Valerie has covered what I would have said. As I said, and Damien, about keeping the food diary and changing little changes, not trying to change your whole diet at once, just trying to do 1 or 2 things, and then once when you think you've got that just goes to the next one. You think you're ready. It's not when your family thinks you're ready. It's not when your friends think you're ready. It's when you think you're ready. I think that it's you that's taking the diet. It's not anybody else. Else they don't live your lifestyle basically. So it's got to be yourself and nobody else.
Janet, I know that you are newly on this journey. And so I know it's, we all started off where you were. We all did. We all started at square one. And I was talking to my mom actually about something totally unrelated. And it was just like about going for a walk. And I was like, it just starts with 1 step. And that's really what the back to care journey is. It's just taking that initial step. And so I know that you're newer to this, but is there something that you think that has been helpful? It could be, support. It could be a resource. It could be something that you have found that is helpful.
I think this actual support group that I just, with you guys has helped me a lot, learning things that like I said, I didn't know. I'm still learning, and it's nice to have that support because I, for so long, needed it. And then I've been working on trying to cut my meats down because doing it cold turkey didn't work for me at one time. So that's what I've been doing is right now I'm cutting red meats out of my diet, still having chicken, but I figured that's how I can start, and that's what I've been doing. Yeah.
Like I said, it's one step at a time, and it's
Yeah.
like Ashley said, it's not no one can dictate the right time for you, because it has to, it's ultimately you who's going to like follow through and, have to stick to this. So you have to do it on a timeline that works for you. And
Right.
that's really hard because others around you, they care for you. And so they're like, let's rip this Band-Aid off. Let's do this. But it
Right.
doesn't work.
Yeah.
Turkey works for
Yeah.
some.
I was gonna say my parents mean well, and it's frustrating because I still have that mindset. I don't want to be ostracized. I'm the only one in my family, in my entire family. And I come from a Hispanic background where meat is such a big thing in our daily food. So definitely I'm different. I'm obviously really different, and so it's just a struggle. But I mean, I'm trying as I'm going. So,
And I think
that's where I'm at.
important is that you're aware of it and you are trying, because I mean, every day is quick. I mean, here I am 12 years, it's been more than that, many years later. And it's still difficult, and different circumstances in your life will present, different reasons why it's difficult. I thought I had it really together, and then I had my daughter, and now planning essentially, like I always planned 2 meals. It was one for my husband and one for myself. Then it was like, now I'm cooking for a toddler who's so picky. Like, how do I incorporate? And then now she has questions. And so, there's going to be these different levels of difficulty, and, they're seasons, they pass and they change. And so, I think it's important to acknowledge that, and then also be like, all right, like Amy said, give yourself some grace, and, tomorrow's a day to start over and try to do better. And I think as long as we're moving forward in a forward progression, that's what really matters, is that we are trying to do better.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree with both those statements. When I have an off day, I'm not going to beat myself up. And I think that's really important to do for yourself, and just say, it was a bad day, but we can start over tomorrow. And or you could even start over in the next hour if you want. Like, don't eat anymore, take your shake, do the things you're supposed to. Like, it's gonna be okay. Like, and that is very important.
So, well, our time is up here, but I wanted to thank the four of you for joining today and for sharing your experiences with each other and with those who are going to be watching this in the future. I encourage those who are watching this to take a look at the resources on our website, hcunetworkamerica.org/back-to-care. And just check out the resources to help understand homocystinuria, the diet, and different ways to get the support that you need to be successful. And if you have any questions for myself or the panelists here, you can reach out to info@hcunetworkamerica.org. Thank you and have a good day.